So, we are looking this morning at this image of God as a gardener. And yeah, I'm loving that kid's book, partly because it's just been so engaging, and you can hear Elijah just loves it. He can't get enough of that book. But because it asks us this question: what is God like? And it's an amazing question for us to be asking during this season of Advent, as we wonder about the God who created everything, and yet who would come to be among us, to save us, to love us, to, to tell us about God's love for us, and to restore us to that love. And so last week, as I mentioned, we looked at this picture of God as a fort, a safe place. And when we find that safe place, we find our hope. And this morning, we're going to look at the image of God as a gardener. And in discovering God as a gardener, we're going to find God's love for us as we lit the candle of love this morning. And God as a gardener shows up as an image in the Bible plenty of times. Tavis has a few examples here on the screen for us. We see the first example all the way back in Genesis 2, verse 8. Now the Lord God had planted a garden in the east, in Eden, and there he put the man he had formed. This image of God planting. We'll get JB to preach on this sometime, God as gardener in Genesis, because this is one of his sweet spots. We also see the God who waters and tends and takes care in Isaiah 58:11. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land, and he will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. The God who nurtures us and waters us as the sun scorches down and dries us up. We also see another beautiful image in Numbers chapter 24 of how God is like a gardener tending to his garden. How beautiful are your tents, Jacob, your dwelling places, Israel. Like valleys, they spread out like gardens beside a river, like aloes planted by the Lord, like cedars beside the waters. Water will flow from their buckets, their seed will have abundant water. And then in the New Testament, we see images of Jesus being the gardener who's scattering his seed generously into the field. And so we have all these beautiful, nurturing images of God who is a planter, a gardener, a sustainer, the one who tends to his crop. And then we come across this one from the book of John. And this is what I'm going to be talking a little bit further on this morning. John chapter 15. It's a familiar passage. John 15, Jesus is speaking. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine. You are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. My Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will bear even more fruit. Pruning wasn't talked about in that kid's book, was it? And it's not something we talk about often. And when I was praying about this image of God as gardener, this is the passage that the Holy Spirit brought to mind immediately. I was, really, Lord? You want me to preach on that? God is a pruning gardener. It's a hard image to deal with, I think, partly because it just sounds so painful. Nobody wants to get snipped and cut and pruned. But as any good gardener will tell you, pruning is necessary if you desire good growth, if you desire a more bountiful harvest, if you desire beauty. In fact, you could say that pruning is the loving thing that a good gardener does. Pruning shows care. Pruning shows attention. The gardener has a vision for what fruitfulness and what beauty can look like. And so the gardener sets about to achieve that through pruning. I should know this firsthand because I'm not a good gardener at all. I'm terrible gardener, actually. Just ask April. And come to our yard sometime to have a firsthand account. We have these amazing raspberry bushes that bear fruit every year. And we planted them right next to these benches we put around our fire pit. And had we been paying attention, caring for them, loving them, they would be shaping now beautifully around the benches and bearing lots of beautiful raspberries every summer. The problem is we don't pay attention. I don't pay attention. I don't care for them. And so what have they done? Well, they've just gone everywhere. And now we can't even sit at our fire pit because there are raspberry stalks growing up between your legs and not bearing good fruit, by the way. Those ones coming through the fire pit area, not bearing good fruit. So, you can tell by my inattention that not pruning is not loving. It's not paying attention. God is, though, by contrast, a good and loving gardener. And pruning is an expression of his love for us. Now, throughout Scripture, we often equate this idea of pruning with discipline. Now, it's really important for us to hear this morning, and I say this with the utmost amount of caution and love, but also, hopefully, straightforwardness. In God's eyes, pruning and discipline are not punitive. It's not meant as punishment, but rather of acts of love. Do you mind putting up the Proverbs passage, Tavis? This is the passage my mind jumped straight to, and this is the passage that the writer of Hebrews quotes in Hebrews 12 as well, talking about God's discipline. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves, as a father the son he delights in. As a parent with two, well, you know who they are. Those boys, they're incredible. They're beautiful. They're energetic. And do they need discipline? Yes. And would I be a loving father, parent, if I didn't set about trying my best to discipline them? No. Would it be easier sometimes to just let them go and shape their lives the way they see fit? Yes, it would be much easier. But God has given me, as their dad, and April as their mom, a responsibility. And he's given us a vision for what a life of flourishing, of fruitfulness might look like. And so he's tasked us with this hard task of setting about to discipline them. And I believe God's pruning, his discipline in our lives, shows that he indeed loves us, that God indeed paid attention to us, that he cares for us, that he desires for us not just to bear fruit, but to bear more fruit, to bear good fruit, to be shaped into the people he created us to be. And in order to do that, God has to, at times, cut away things. Anyone heard this quip? Do you know the best way to sculpt an elephant? Anyone hear this before? Get a big piece of rock and then start chipping away everything that doesn't look like an elephant. Oh, thanks. Someone at least appreciated that. I mean, it's really simple if you think about it. And I wonder if that's a little bit similar with us. God created us in his image. But in our sin and in our rebellion, that image was marred. It was ruined. It became distorted. It's like we were created as beautiful trees, but when we rebelled against God, sin and death started growing in our lives. And like thorny and like bare branches, it started just growing every which way until the image of that original beautiful tree was lost. But when Jesus saved us from our sin and rebellion on the cross, and through defeating death and sin through that empty tomb, here's the neat thing. He grafted us. He took us and grafted our lives into his life. His life in us, our lives in him. And we might find in him life again. Life with the Father, life with each other, lives of love, lives of fruitfulness. But here's the thing. The work isn't done. God, the gardener, knows the original design of who he's created us to be, and so he continues to cut away at the sin, at the thorny branches, at anything that doesn't resemble his original purpose for us. Now, this work of pruning isn't a salvation issue. It's not like God is saying, hey, you won't be saved until I prune you down exactly the way I want you. No, it's a matter of fruitfulness. It's a matter of flourishing into the lives he has for us. What does he say in John 15:2? The Father, the gardener, cuts off every branch of me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will what? Bear even more fruit. So God, through this work of pruning in our lives, is shaping us to become the people that he intended for us to be from the beginning, from that original garden, finding out who we are in Jesus and finding out our purpose. And our original purpose was to actually be co-gardeners with God. Now, pruning does lead to more fruit. And this is a journey that April and I have been discovering in our walk with Jesus recently. But we've also been discovering how difficult this is. And I've asked April to share just briefly a little bit of her experience. Thank
you. Good? I don't know about you guys. I'm sure this is not just me, but one thing that God has been asking for a long time for me to prune in my life is the amount of time I spend on my phone. And the way I've often looked at it is I'm so busy. My kids demand my attention all the time. And this is for me. I just want to have some time to just zone out for a little bit, scroll something, and just relax. And I don't know about you, but I don't usually feel much better afterwards. And so one thing we've been doing as a family for quite a while now is that we've been doing our best to practice a Sabbath once a week, 1 day a week. And part of our Sabbath is that we put our phones away for the day. And I was noticing that on these days when my phone was put away, that I was so much more motivated to do things around my house. I was like, oh, I got to organize this. Oh, I got laundry to do. I'm going to do laundry. And normally that would be stuff that I'd be like, oh, I don't have the energy for this. I really don't want to do it. I was like, that's really weird. Why do I always want to do this on the Sabbath when I'm not supposed to be working? And so the other day, I was in the kitchen, and I was like, oh, where's my phone? And I thought about it, and I was like, it's in the front entrance. But I had kind of started doing some work in the kitchen, and I was like, and it's going to stay there. And it wasn't Sabbath, but I realized that in pruning that, or having that taken away, that there was something so much more valuable given to me in that time, where I've thought about this a lot, where God, like Aaron said, he's created us to be co-gardeners. And so part of that is creating order and beauty in our lives. And I've realized that cleaning my kitchen and doing laundry and keeping my house in order, though it's not necessarily the most fun thing to do, it creates a lot more order and beauty in my life and brings so much more meaning to my life than picking up my phone and scrolling for half an hour. and putting it down and not really having anything to show for that time. So that's what God has been pruning in my life. And I am still a work in progress. Still have a very far ways to go, but it's a good start, it feels like.
Thank you. As April says, this is a work in progress, and this is not a sermon to say, hey, you got to do more to make God happier. Not at all. But this is a message, I think, that I know I was just reflecting on myself constantly this week. God, are there things in my life that you do wish to prune because you love me? Because you desire my life to bear more fruit for you and for the good of our family. I have to say, it's amazing. God's been challenging me in this area as well, with the phones, with devices. For me, working at home a lot, it's so easy for my branches to get so tangled. Work, life, family, all these things together. And God's trying to bring some rest and some beauty and some things into my life. And I have to say it's hard because I'm used to it. We're used to having our devices around. We're used to having these things. But God's given us glimpses into, again, he's not saying I love you any more or any less. I want you to hear that very clearly. God's not saying I'll love you more if you put your phone away. That's not what he's saying at all. What God is saying is that I have great plans and great purposes for your life, and I will be with you no matter what, and I will walk with you every step of the way. But I also have, in those great plans and purposes for you, an opportunity for you to flourish, an opportunity for you to bear more fruit, and that fruit will be good for you. It'll be good for your family. It will be good for this world, and it will bring me more glory. And I believe that's his message to us this morning. He's not saying, again, do this so I'll love you more. Not at all. But he's saying, I love you so much that I want to see you grow and flourish as much as you possibly can. Will you join me in that journey? And friends, it's hard. It can be really hard, and being pruned can be very difficult. April and I were talking about this yesterday, because as much of a celebration as we had when her phone got left in the entrance that one day, we had a really difficult Sabbath just a couple days later where we thought, we can change our plans, we can do this and that, and then it felt like the opposite of flourishing. And we talked it through and we thought, wow, God, you're still pruning us. We still don't have this figured out. And it was difficult. We had some difficult conversations. And yet at the end of that, I realized this. And I'd never read John 15 this way before. But maybe you'll see it a little bit with me. I've always focused on abide in me as I abide in you. It's a beautiful word, isn't it? God's life flowing into us as we have our lives flow into him in this beautiful picture of resting and remaining in Jesus. But I had never really taken that word about God pruning us before the command to rest and abide in him. But if we start the passage and read the passage as Jesus taught it, my Father is the gardener, and he will prune every vine in me, every branch in me that does bear fruit. And pruning is going to hurt. Now, will you still remain? Will you remain in me as I remain in you? As I am pruning you? That is where I was wrestling with this week. And God, man, I want to get off this pruning block. Please, this is too painful. Just put those scissors away for a while, please, those shears. But then God keeps reminding me, you know what? You want to get off, and it's okay. But I will remain in you. I am with you. So remain with me. And if we wonder and if we worry about God's intention in this? Does God really have what's best for us in all of this? I just turn us to the last part of John 15. You are my friends. This is verse 14. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. If we think about that as the one who is pruning us, that we have the God of the universe who desires to see us grow and flourish into all that he has for us, then maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to remain in him as he remains in us. Now, I had some really amazing and exciting conversation questions for us, and I'm going to invite us to take these over to the next room with us as we have some time in fellowship. Do you mind just putting them up, Tavis? Oh, that's from a different time. That's okay. I'll just read them out for you now, and you can contemplate these and maybe even journal about them this week. Talk to God about them this week. Have you experienced God's pruning in your life? And did it feel loving at the time? How might be God pruning you, or how might God be even pruning us as Avenue Church right now? And how can we see that as love? And then God had me add this last one this morning because I know this is a hard topic. Pruning at times can feel like we're actually being cut down. Is there a difference? Is there a difference? Sometimes that the pain is just too much and the suffering is too great. Could that be God's pruning? I don't have an answer for that one. But the question that God was inviting me to share with you, and as we contemplate that one, is how do we experience God's love even when it seems like it is too painful? How do we still experience God's love in that time? Oh, here we go. Thanks. And so I'm going to invite JB and Aaron up as we close, as we sing this song in response. Lord, I need you, because that's really all this is. We need God and his grace and his mercy, and his strength to remain and abide in him as he does this work of love, of pruning in our lives. Let's stand and sing together.